we've got a lovely ballet dancing figure today to have a go at. Quite simple lines you want to work on, but it is a tricky draw. So if you see with my guide marks, I've started with a vertical and then an oval or an ellipse for the head here. I've used the head measurement, placing that in as a guide to how many into the body, into the legs, and I want you to really focus on getting those really nice angles. So you can see here I've got a guide mark here and a guide mark here, which has helped me to get the Y of those arms and hands coming out. So take your time and draw that one out. Colours wise, I've got Naples yellow. If you haven't got Naples yellow, a watery mix of raw sienna will do. A watery mix of permanent rose and cobalt blue, that's quite watery as well. Then I've got a mix of like an aubergine colour, which is cobalt blue, burnt sienna and permanent rose. That makes a nice aubergine, it's good for shadow. I've got a dab of sepia ready for some hair, and I've got cerulean blue for the dress. Now if you haven't got cerulean blue, then you could use something like cobalt blue with a tiny touch of lemon yellow in, that would work quite nicely, or maybe an intense blue or phthalo blue as well. So this, you could use whatever blue really that you wanted. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is come over with some water, and we're going over the whole figure. Now the important thing now is, now you've done that drawing, you don't want to lose those lines totally, but as you know me quite well now, I like to pop a bit of atmosphere into the picture, and to do that it needs some background colour. So it doesn't need to be water everywhere, but you definitely want it over the figure. Make sure your brush is nice and clean. So I'm dabbing in first of all to the Naples yellow. So it doesn't matter if it goes further. I don't want you to worry about it. So I'm coming onto the legs, onto the figure itself. I've got that base colour in, but it's blurring outwards, which is absolutely fine. In fact, I'm going to take a little bit further up, pop a few bits in as well. What's quite nice with this, if you think about the movement of a ballet dancer, and you can just flow a little bit as if they were moving around as well. That's quite nice. We'll do that. So that was a Naples yellow. Now bring a touch of the rose in. So very little on the brush. I'm using around number 10, but I'm putting very little paint or colour on the brush. And again, just coming down. I'm looking really where the warmer areas are, so that I'm picking those out. And we do the same again. And do a little bit of a flow. And then this is that very watery purple mix that I've made. Start to pop a little bit of ruching into the dress here. Look where the shadow is, that's gonna, purple really is our shadow colour. Pop a little bit of that in. You don't want a lot in at this stage, wet on the skin tone, It tends to look a little bit more too, it looks bruised otherwise. Pop the shadow in once this is dry. And again, we have a few little marks. Might indicate movement. And then pick up a tiny touch of the blue that I'm going to use for the clothes. I'm just going to start to pop a little bit of that in. So I'm just dotting that in. This is your base layer, so we're going to have more coming through later. So it's quite a fun one today. I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, so that's all dried nicely. I'm going to be a little bit experimental. I always like to have a little bit of an experiment. I'm going to come on with a bit of clean film here to create this ruching texture. So because it's nice and dry and it's a cotton paper that I'm using, the paint's not going to lift. So I'm just going to pop a layer of water over. So I don't want this to be too strong. And then I'm going to bring in the cerulean blue. So the cerulean blue I'm taking neat actually from the palette and dropping that in. So I want the effect of a transparency there, because I want to see the legs through the cerulean blue. But I also would quite like to get this nice sort of ruching effect. So dropping this cerulean blue in. I'm following the direction of the ruching. I've got my clean film ready. Now the trick with the clean film is to make sure you don't move the paint. So I've got my clean film ready now, and I want lines that are pulled that way. So basically pop it on and pull and tweak as I'm going, I should get those nice sort of ruching lines. I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to let that dry. Okay, so that's all dried nicely and it's got a really nice effect. I've just peeled off the clean film at the end and just given it a blast with a hairdryer just to make sure it's totally dry. So I'm now going to use a round number 6 and some of these colours and start to come in a little bit more on dry now. So I'm going to take the direction of the light as coming from this way, so it makes it easier to know where I'm going really with these colours. Now I'm not a big fan of detail, so you'll find that I won't put in the face. So this is a Naples yellow that I'm coming in with. I'm just starting to bring out some slightly darker areas. And run this through. So So little shapes really where the shadow, I'm accentuating the shadow more, and then I'll accentuate the light more, so I get much more of an effect as I'm doing this. Now I've got a little bit of the rose. So my round number 6 just means I'm a little bit more in control of where everything's going now. Just going to lift out a little bit of light on the nose. So the rose is just giving it a little bit of warmth and dampening a little bit in places. And come into that shadow colour. So this is that purple. Again, just dampening those in a little bit. A little touch of purple just under the arm, so under the arm, under the armpits. I've got a little bit down the neck here. I'm going to come into some sepia. Just pop some hair on. Now I want the hair to blend in a little bit. I don't want this to be too painting numbers. It's more fluid than that. So I want that blend to be there, but I don't want it to blend too far, so it's a case of watching it and then with a clean damp brush just taking it back. So it's nearly dry. A little bit of light in there as well. So this is the Naples yellow coming onto the legs now. And onto the ballet shoes. So I'm bringing it up through the dress as well. Then this is the rose, just dabbing that in. So you ever get a bit that you think, well, that's a bit too bright, then just take a bit of water in or a damp brush and just take a little bit off. Then this is the watered down purple. Bringing that in. more shadow. I come back to the hair now, and just because it will be drying, I can just lift out that light there, and that little bit of light at the top there. Take a little bit more of that away as well. Come into, so this is with the cerulean blue, just starting to pull out the darker edges. So the more colour you get on at this stage, and the more we do with the background, the lighter the figure will become. So just with the damp brush, I'm just running that through, just so they get some areas where I've kept it really light and dry. And then I'm going to come on the same here. So I'm really more focused on the tone than the actual colour on this at this point. The colour is there underneath anyway. I want to create this sort of sparkle and light effect, and that happens best with the dry paint going on, and then an odd bit of softening in. So I've got some fantastic texture already from the clean film, so now I'm just going to work in some dry marks. Just following the flow, looking at the folds of the fabric. Just to accentuate this a little bit more. Okay, I'm just going to dry that one off. Okay, so I'm going to reflect a little bit of colour underneath the foot. So that's a little bit of Naples yellow and some of the purple mix. That's going to give a nice idea of reflective surface there. And the next thing that I'm going to do is just pull out some of this aubergine colour that we made up. So, because I'm going to use this as a bit of a background colour, this is going to give an effect of transparency by me coming through with a little bit of this now. probably didn't want to go over the leg there. Let's just soften that bit in there, because the leg's not transparent. So these are just little soft bits that are going to then appear to give an effect of it being a little bit more see-through and transparent. So I'm just going to give a few. We can do the same up here. A few little blazes. If you want any additional shadow, it's a perfect colour for shadow. If you want to add some darks in places. So I'm just dotting a few little bits. And put a little bit under that heel. Be very careful with your skin tone. You want your skin tone to always stay as light as possible. It's very easy to start looking, the skin to start looking bruised and not quite right. So keep that with less detail. Okay, and then what I'm going to do, so I've got my round number 10 and my number 6, and I'm loading them both with quite a lot of water. I'm going to pop into the aubergine colour. Now I don't want to create a halo around this, and I don't want to create a whole dark background. So what I'm going to do is just take little bits on and wet further than it needs to go. So you can either wet the area first, so I'm coming around everything, or you can pop the colour on then soften in. So it's up to you how you want to do it, but this just gives you a bit of a darkness to help accentuate the skin tone and sets off the figure nicely without eliminating everything. And the key is nice clean water. Nice, seeing the tip of your brush is really useful. So you can see where you're popping this colour. These little bits of darks should accentuate. Don't want you to go everywhere. So you're just picking out little bits. If you come round all the way round and pick out every single and a line all the way round, you'll end up with a halo of colour, which you don't really want. A bit more water along there. So you can see that I'm leaving those odd little gaps. if you try too much around the hands, you'll end up with them sticking out like a sore thumb, so don't try too much around the hands either. Unless you've got very clear idea where your fingers are, where they're going to be. Nice smooth neckline. Nice, pick out the jawline there. I'm going to accentuate a little bit of the hand there, but not a lot. All of this sort of creates a little bit of movement as well. This is the bit where you don't want too much detail. Just enough. Okay, I'm going to dry that off now. Okay, so that's dried off nicely now. The last thing that I really want to do is just add a little bit more movement to the picture. So to do that, I'm going to use my bit of kitchen towel just to cover over. And then I've loaded my brush up with watery blue, and I'm just going to start to speckle. So I'm just hitting my brush. It tends to go everywhere. You've got to be a little bit careful to get a really nice effect. I don't mind if some goes on the figure, I just don't want it all over the figure. Just trying to create a little bit more movement. The harder you hit it, the more you'll get that sort of flecky movement. You'll also be wiping it off the walls. Keep it as close as you can. It's also quite nice to have a little bit of quiet space in there if you can get that. I just want to pop a little bit more up here, so you can be quite directional with it. So I've gone around the hands. And then if you want to, you can have a little spritz of some of it. So this is just a water spray. So if I want to just blend a few towards this top bit, I don't want these to be too precise. Then I can just spritz that. Spritz it in a few little places. And then it just gives a nice blend and a really nice sense of movement. Hope you've enjoyed it. I will see you next week.